Hello and welcome back to the Life Fit podcast. I'm your host, Jack O'Halloran, and it is my honour today to bring to you a conversation I had with the BAFTA-winning writer, filmmaker, teacher and martial artist, Geoff Thompson. After suffering from sexual abuse at the age of 11, Geoff turned to a life of pain, violence and self-abuse, until later overcoming his demons, rediscovering his true source within, and turning his pain into a gift for the world. He has since written over 50 books, 15 multi-award winning films, several acclaimed stage plays, a musical, and has published thousands of articles. He's written many books on self-help, spirituality, self-defense and martial arts. And in this beautiful conversation, we break down for you a variety of topics, such as the power of word and rhythm, channeling, overcoming crisis, spirituality, and much, much more. And as always, we also share many tips, tricks and hacks that you can start implementing and practicing today to help you in your journey through life. If you'd like to find out more about Geoff and his work, hit him up on Instagram where he is at Geoff_Thompson_official, and I highly recommend you check the page out because he shares so many snippets of wisdom from his work. Geoff has also been really kind this week to donate to us 2 copies of his latest book, Notes from a Factory Floor. We're going to give 1 copy away to our patrons over on patreon.com. And Stella, my main Patreon, thank you so much. I really appreciate all your support and your encouragement over the last few months. It's really meant a lot. And if you'd like to become a patron and join Stella, then I would appreciate it so much, and it would really help us to continue to grow this show and continue to be able to bring content like this to you. We will do the draw over there sometime either the end of the week or the start of next week. And the other copy I'm going to give away on our social media platforms. That's Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn, where we are at Life Fit Studios, or my personal account at JackO'Halloran_IE. And all you have to do to be in with a chance to win is either tag somebody in the comments below who could be interested in the show, share the post to your story, or share the post to your feed. And each contribution you make to us will give you an extra entry into the draw and really help us to get this beautiful episode out there. Geoff would also like to give special mention this week to Gabriella from Recite Films and his wife Sharon, who were mentioned this week as part of the Praise It Forward segment, where we give each guest an opportunity to plug and praise other individuals creating huge contribution to our world. This is our way of spreading our love, gratitude and thanks to all of our fellow ass kickers out there. So, Gabriella and Sharon, thank you so much for being perfectly you. So, without further ado, I welcome you now to sit back, relax, open up that heart of yours, and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to the show, Geoff Thompson, the one and only. How are you today?
Very good, and it's great to hear your voice because I just love the Irish. My mum's Irish. It reminds me of my mum. Reminds me of Belfast. It reminds me of Ireland, which I love. I love the Irish people, and I love the accent. It does something to me. So It's a great pleasure to be talking to you and all my friends in Ireland.
I appreciate that, and you're probably one of the few people who can actually understand us. I was interviewing with an American yesterday, and I always get the criticism. It's like, you need to slow down and pronounce and all this. But yeah,
it's a beautiful lyrical language. I think that's where my writing came from, because my writing is very poetic. It's very rhythmic, over and above the use of words. There's a rhythm to it. And I often wonder where it come from. But then I listen to the Irish speaking, and I look at some of the Irish writers that I love, like Beckett, and it's you can see it's actually in the language. It's the rhythm that heals, really, Jack. It's not the use of words. I mean, it's obviously they call it Kotodamagaku, the use of magic sound, but it's to do with the rhythm as well. It's the tempo, it's the beat. So if you read, people often talk about the Bibles and whether their Bibles are of any use these days, but just the rhythm. I listened to the whole of the Old Testament and the New Testament, about 90 hours on audio, and I realized that it was the rhythm of the words and the sound and the gaps in between the words, like that.
They say that.
Have a listen to this, Jack.
Yeah.
So when I'm talking, and then there's a gap in between, that's where I feel God. So there's a rhythm and there's a gap, and God's in all of that. So the healing and the teaching is actually in the rhythm, and I think that's why the Irish are such great. So many great writers come from Ireland, and it's just a really lovely, just a lovely language to listen to as well. So I think I've inherited some of that. I hope I have anyway, because I know when I write, especially when I write things like notes from the factory floor, which we're gonna give a couple of copies away, aren't we, to listeners?
Sure, yeah.
When I wrote that, it was the rhythm of it. It was the rhythm of writing anecdotally, the rhythm of writing. Even if you look at the copy of the book, when you open the pages, you'll see that even the way the paragraphs are set out, it's not set out in a dense way. It's set out almost like a poem, even though it's like 120,000 words. It's written in a way that's pleasing, even if you don't quite know why it's pleasing. And that's about me catching the rhythm. And obviously I've got to be open to catch the muse, let the rhythm come through me, and try not to interrupt it. That's why I said to my publisher, when I asked him, when he published me, I said, can you please not interfere with the the breaks in paragraphs? The way I've written it, and the Divine CEO, the way I've written it is the way I want it to be read, and it creates a rhythm. So I recognize that the rhythm, if you listen to the Hindu texts, if you look at, say, the Quran, especially the latter chapters of the Quran, the poetry and the rhythm is so beautiful. It's so pleasing, and it's beautiful because it captures the essence of our source. And you listen to the Buddhist mantras, people think it's about the words. The words don't really make any sense. Read the Zohar, same thing. The Zohar is an exegesis on the Old Testament, but it's not the words. They shatter the ego if you try to make sense of them. It's just the rhythm, and the rhythm is pleasing. The rhythm is beautiful. The rhythm can climb inside people and heal them because it contains spirit, of course, breath, pneuma, or it goes back to the Latin in spirito. So it means that the breath contains spirit. So if I'm able to get the rhythm, and you're able to get the rhythm, I'm able to give you soul. I'm able to give you spirit, and that's why it can go in you and inspire you, because the words is our spirit entering you, and you become inspired in spirit. So that's a long way of explaining that. That's what I love about the Irish. I love the
beautiful
rhythm.
And as the saying goes, I've often heard, because I'm a musician, they say the music is between the notes. You know, you can have, like, pick your favorite song in the world. If you took all of the notes and just squished them together, which happens a lot in modern music with compression and the likes, it takes the beauty from it. But it's that space, and it's even, even in conversation, if both people were talking at the same time and there was no space between it, then there'd be no chance for that connection. Same in, like, I see about salesmen and the likes, and you're ever selling something and you make an offer. The worst thing you can ever do is, if there's silence after your offer, is break the silence. You always that silence, it creates that space to bring someone together. So I totally resonate with that, and it's a beautiful thing. And I see what you're saying about your editors, and that you don't want them to disrupt that. I had an interesting talk the other day, and somebody said, they were just chatting about the podcast, and they were saying, they listen to it at 1.5 the speed. And we were speaking earlier about, I was talking with an American, and they were saying, the Irish are so hard to understand. And I always kind of was told by my mother and those that are a bit judgy to me that, I can mumble and the like. So, but yeah, anyway, sorry. So the conversation, they were saying they listened back at 1.5 the speed, and they were like, your voice was still very clear and all this. So I went back and I tried it out. I listened at 1.5 the speed. Like, geez, this is interesting. But I noticed that I wasn't able to get the same feel from it at that speed. Then I went to 2 times the speed, and the feel had changed and it was an emotional kind of podcast that I was listening to,
but all of a sudden, because it was twice the speed, it actually turned from an emotional kind of one to more comical, because it was, it sounded like a cartoon. And then I went further and I went 3 times the speed, and it just, it was pure satire at that point. So I completely get that.
Well, it's sound.
Yeah.
If you look at the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Egyptian files, they talk about Heka, the use of sound, the use of magic sound. And in Japanese Aikido, they call it Kotodama Gaku, the use of sound. Of course, we use it every day, but mostly people don't use it in a kind way. They don't recognize how powerful their voice is. This is why somebody like Buckminster Fuller, who was one of the greatest inventors of his generation, had a breakdown at the age of 40, realized he hadn't really accomplished much with his life and wondered why, and recognized that when he looked back in his life, the only times he'd been truly successful were when he did things for other people with no agenda. He also realized at that point that his words, the spoken words, sound was a very powerful energy. And he decided not to speak at all until he knew what the hell he was talking about. So he said he didn't speak for a year. He wrote a book called The Critical Path, if you get a chance to look at it. He said he didn't speak for a year because he knew the creative and the destructive nature of sound. So if we don't understand reciprocity, the law of compensation, if we don't understand spirit in the sound and we put sound out into the world, we can damage people and damage ourselves, of course, just as easily as we can heal them. If you think about how many people sit around cafes destroying their friends with judgmental opinions and conversation, how they assassinate character and think it's okay because they will precurse it by going, I think he's really nice, but and then kind of character assassinate them. Someone like Al-Ghazali, one of the great Muslim imams, said he didn't even like to process things about other people because it so quickly fell into opinion and judgment. And he said, and then you are putting spirit out into the world and it's coming through a negative filter and it will do harm and it will always return, of course, to where it started. It will always come out of the vacuum, out of our singularity, and eventually, like the boomerang, the karmic boomerang, it will return. So when you start to understand the power of sound, and I am a man that's used it very destructively, to my shame, but I'm now a man that uses it only to heal, only from kindness. But when you realize it makes you very excited about going into the world and using sound to inspire people, to heal people, to give people aspiration, to use sound as an intercession to guide people on a better path, to record your sound and your spirit actually into ink. So I haven't got a book in front of me, but if you imagine that, just looks like writing on a page, doesn't it? These are my notes from different talks I've been doing. This is what God's taught me. This has got what I've been shown. These are the things I didn't know I knew until I shared them with others. But that, when you're looking at that written word, you're not looking at written word, you're looking at ink that is recording spirit. There is spirit. I'm not talking metaphorically, I'm talking literally. It is recorded in ink. So you can pick up a book. I remember putting a call out to God or to the universe with a particular problem, and somebody sent me a book from one of St. Paul's apostles from nearly 2,000 years ago, and it was like he'd seen my letter and sent me a letter back in a book form. It was like he answered my question directly. This man's spirit was recorded nearly 2,000 years ago, and it's still lifted from the page, entered my front room, and inspired me and healed me. When you talk about inspiring, of course, when we inspire someone, it means we connect them to spirit. When we're connected to spirit, we've either begun the healing or we've been healed. So once you start to realize that, you start to be very careful about shaking your fist at the television when a cartoon politician makes you upset, or voicing unqualified opinions because it sounds convincing. or being aggressive or being angry, because that spirit, which of course is pure, beautiful, just like light coming through a projector, has to come through those negative filters. It goes out into the world and it lives. We know that. How many times have we, if we said something about somebody and it's come back to us and we felt that guilt and that conscience, and we've seen how hurt somebody is? Well, how often have we, I know me personally, I've destroyed people with my sound because I was so ignorant. But I've also literally healed people, or I've allowed the spirit in my sound to heal people. So it is a particular line of inquiry that people should look at, because once you get it, you start going, oh, if that's how it works, if I'm kind and I make a kind sound, it will sate all of my cells, trillions of them. So I will be the first receiver of that kindness. I'll give it to somebody else. It goes into the reciprocal world and it heals and it will come back again. I have stuff coming back to me from 30 years ago, things I said. People write me letters and something I may have said and completely forgotten 30 years ago. It comes back to me from somebody who rang me or wrote to me who I didn't even know, and I wrote back, and that spirit entered them and inspired them. One guy wrote to me yesterday, God, I hope he doesn't mind me saying it, but a guy called Charles, and he said I'd spoken to him. He was living on his brother's settee, and he was, in a bad place, and something I'd said, I don't remember what it was. This is just what he said. Something that he said entered him, and now he runs, these two huge businesses with hundreds and hundreds of employees, and he's constantly putting out a good noise into the world because he heard the good noise 30 years ago. I wasn't even aware I did that. I said it. I was talking to 20 people a day, Jack. No, you don't remember, but it shows you the power of sound. And if you can record the sound like you are now, and your intention is to do what you said when we were talking before, the intention is to receive this sound in order to share it with other people, which is the secret to the tree of life. Tree of life says we should receive in order to share. If we receive in order to share, we will be given abundance, and that abundance needs to be passed on to other people. So that becomes our purpose.
That's beautiful.
Our intention.
Yeah. I had a very similar experience, when you, and quite often, and you spoke yourself about, being in that place where you're using your word, let's say wrongfully, and it develops into shame and so on. About two years ago, it was New Year's Eve. I was just about to play a gig, and I was in the depths of despair, in my own personal life. I was depressed off my head, and I went for dinner on New Year's Eve by myself. This is around Christmas time, a lonely time of year. I wasn't long out of a long-term relationship, and I was sitting by myself in a big restaurant. There was loads of families around and all of this, and I decided there and then, because often it takes the hard moment, the slap in the face moment to actually begin the growth, that transcendence period.
Crisis, yeah.
Yeah, and I just made a decision. I was like, fuck this. I was like, I am going to tune into something, anything, that gives me meaning. And I just sat there. I didn't go near the phone. I didn't go near a book or note or anything. I just sat there waiting patiently for my meal. And even with my meal, it took me about 50 minutes to go through fork by fork. And I'd made that decision, and I really began to tap into the resonance of it. And the very next day, I was handed a book. Now, I wasn't a religious guy growing up. I was taught to hate going to mass and all of that. My mother tried her best to get me to go. My father tried his best to get me not to go. There was always that disparity. So I was handed a book called The Sermon on the Mount. So obviously that's the Bible passage, but it was a book written by a fella called Emmett Fox. Very unknown guy now, but back in the 30s and 40s, he used to speak in front of 10, 20,000 people back then, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
And this is, it's basically like a linguistic translation of the Sermon on the Mount, looking at the words as they were written and what they meant from that point of view. And basically all it meant, it was a self-help book. It was like the Sermon on the Mount was a you know, it was a transcription of connectivity. It was a quantum physics notebook, if anything. Yeah. And it was just the timing of that, and you know, it was such a synchronicity that the day before I was at that point, and the very next day this book came, and it just gave me such a manual. So that tapping into source, and again, I had another experience 12 months ago, pretty much to the day, for some reason, and I've heard you speak about this before too, about this idea of channeling and how we're just, you know, it comes to us and we're just supposed to let it go again onto the next person. But I went through a bout of songwriting. Now, I didn't plan this. I didn't intend to go songwriting. And in about 3 weeks, I wrote 22 songs. I would wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'd have 2 songs written in 10 minutes. It was just coming and coming and coming. And I was recording it and putting it down, and I'd listen back. And I'd hear when I'd listen back that I'd lose the space between the notes as I was listening, because it's, you know, when we record ourselves, it's a very vulnerable place. Lots of people will say that when they have to video, you know, an interview for a PhD or whatever it is, or different things, that, you know, it's so vulnerable that they end up disconnecting from their source and they get into the ego and all of that.
Yeah.
So any one of those 22 songs, I might have recorded 10, 15 times through the phone or through, you know, these microphones and so on. And eventually it was just a process of letting go until I was eventually like, yeah, that is perfectly spaced. It's perfectly, you know, it's just abundance in source. You know, and it's such a powerful thing, because I think in today's world, we're so inundated with stress. We're so inundated with judgment all around us, and we perceive, you know, we're judged based on the persona, as opposed to the character. We're viewed as the person as opposed to the man. And so many of us get lost in that. And we're afraid to do what we want to do. And we continue to work the office job, or continue to work the whatever job it is that we don't love, because we think, oh, we have to. What would people think if I was to be fabulous, and if I was to be amazing, and if I was to be this and that? It's like, we could be dead tomorrow, you know? And I think tapping into that, and I don't know, I've heard you on your story before, and maybe some of our audience haven't, but, and again, you spoke about shame and how, you know, you used your word for evil, or for, you know, for hurt and things like that. But I guess, we're a few minutes in now, but usually where I would start the pod is getting people to know your story, where it all kind of started. I know you started in Coventry, rough enough town, the 80s and the likes, and you ended up into martial arts and all of that. But where did it all begin for you? And what trials, tribulations, and what hard moments did you have to go through that, you know, you had to go through? Nobody else could have went through them for you. And then maybe eventually lead on to, at what point in your future did it finally become enough to where you began your new transcendence?
Well, I would tell you that I started as a writer. I started as a creative, and I got interrupted at the age of 11. So I was writing. I've said this often, but I was doing 15 pages when other kids were doing 3 lines. It was natural.
Yeah.
That was coming through me. So I was a developing writer, developing artist. That was interrupted at the age of 11 when I was groomed and sexually abused by a beloved teacher. I look back on this now and understand more. I understand more why that would happen, and that it put me on a path I wouldn't have gone on otherwise. And it gave me a very strong purpose. The word purpose comes from the word logos, which means the word of God. So it allowed me to hear the word of God, which was like, not this direction, but this direction. And it sent me on this path of learning. I also recognize now that there are natural energies around us. You may call it evil or negativity, the devil, Satan, whatever. Every faith has a different name for it. And this energy is as real as gravity, and it's as separate from us as gravity as well. And it's ordained, but it will try to interrupt a powerful path. So if we have a powerful path, if we have a powerful calling, which I didn't know it at the time, it will try to interrupt that path and take you off that path and scare you away from it. If you can recognize that, you're able to absorb this energy you're able to turn into it, intercourse with it, completely absorb it. And when you absorb it, the nature of that evil or that negativity is transcended, and the energy that's locked into it comes over to you, and you're able to use it as oil for the lamp. So this energy, a bit like if you look at a light bulb, you've got a negative terminal and a positive terminal, and then in between you've got a thin wire of tungsten that joins the two together. So the negative and the positive are impotent without each other. It takes this metal bar across the top, and tungsten has an abnormally high melting point. So when it joins these two together, it creates a glow, it creates light. So the light comes from the burning of the tungsten. But you can't do it without the negative and the positive. You can't just do it with a negative terminal, and you can't just do it with a positive or negative terminal. You've got to have both together. So what I recognized later was that this negative energy is there. We can call it evil, but nobody says, you don't see in the newspaper, evil electricity killed a child who touched a bare wire. You don't see people say, evil water drowned a child who got out of the depth. We just recognize it as a tragic accident, and just somebody that didn't understand the energy. So this energy is only negative until it's combined with the positive through this tungsten filament, and then it creates glow. So if you look at the negative and the positive, which is in all of us, that's the tree of life. And if you see this tungsten that is at a very high melting point as the self or the will. So when we feel these energies and we join the will to the negative and the positive, there's no longer a negative and positive, there's just glow. But in order to get to that place, we have to put our will or our soul, when they make tungsten, it comes from ore, and it's put through a burning, a roasting, it's put through chemical reactions, it's put through this tremendous assault in order to take its melting point to a abnormally high level before it can be a transmitter for light. So what I recognized at the age of 11 as something evil happening to me turned out to be something very good, because obviously this energy tried to interrupt my path. I saw it as a conscious energy, and I saw it as having a semi-autonomy, and it's out there. But I also saw that it was ordained. It was there in order to help me if I was able to use it. So this put me on this kind of interrupted my path at the age of 11. So the creative kid was gone. He was gone. He left the body at this age when I was abused by this guy. I was so terrified. I was so afraid. I can't even recall the incident. Only that the betrayal was magnified by the fact that I trusted him, I loved him, I admired him. He was a martial arts teacher, and we were all staying over. Well, all the kids were supposed to be staying over at our club to fix the mats and stuff like that. And when I got there, it turns out there was lots of things going on, but no other kids there. I was the only one. And of course, you're suspicious, but at the age of 11, you don't really understand. I'd only been in the world, a few years, you know what I mean? So I didn't really understand. I only knew that I woke up in the middle of the night, and this person who I idolized and trusted was abusing me. So it's not just the abuse itself. And obviously it's the fact that it's coming from. I was lying facing this way, and this came from behind. So I knew, there was three of us sharing this kind of makeshift knock-up bed. So I felt this weight coming over that woke me up and touching me, but I couldn't see a face. I was too petrified to turn. Obviously, I knew it was him. We were the only ones in the room, but I felt the hand on me. I felt the hand in my pants. I felt the hands groping me and exposing me, and I had this terror. So for the next 30 years, I'm living in terror of this invisible hand that's going to turn up at any time and take my autonomy, take my will. But if you look at the word will, if you look at, when you see in the Bible, it says, enter the land, enter the promised land. enter the land of milk and honey, enter the kingdom, find the kingdom of God, enter the land. Once you find the kingdom of God, all of the good things will come to you, but find the kingdom first. The word land comes from the root word will. It means will. So what it's saying is find your will, find your own autonomy, find your control. When you've got the will, when you've found your own will, and in other words, when you've identified who you actually are, and you can control this physiological, psychological, sociological body, this metaphysical body, when you can control that will and you have mastery over that will, it will connect to the divine will. My will was stolen from me at the age of 11, or certainly a part of it was, and it was replaced by the hot coal of abuse. So from the age of 11 afterwards, I went to bed in that place at 11, and I woke up, I was 100 years old, and I was frightened. I was frightened to live. I was like Mesna climbing Nanga Parbat when he got stuck on this hostile mountain and the wind was trying to whip him off. He said, I was too afraid to go up. I was too afraid to go down. I was too afraid to stay where I was. At that moment in time, he said, I was crying because I didn't want to be away from my wife. This is a hardened mountaineer. He said, I was afraid to live. And that's how it left me. It left me in an agitated state with a very sensitive sympathetic nervous system. So my adrenals would go very quickly. It left me damaged and impaired. It left me with a very distorted psyche. So I grew up with psychotic jealousy. Later, and if you've ever experienced abandonment schema and psychotic jealousy, it's painful. It's painful, Jack.
Yeah.
You know, even as a married man, there are days when if your wife leaves the room, you are afraid she's betraying you. You are sure she's betraying you because you're a piece of shit. Because even the people that loved you abused you. Nobody can be trusted. So that's what this guy left me. And it left me with this reservoir of dissonance, anger, rage, which created depressions, obviously, because that's a block of my energy. I later realized that he'd taken my will and he'd replaced it with his will. So the burning coals of abuse means that someone has taken a part of your soul or a part of your autonomy and has replaced it with a negative cognition, a negative perception. And that perception was, or that belief was, nobody could be trusted. Do not be in the room with somebody unless there's people around you. Go out and develop the skills so that you can kill people and get all of the war paint and get all of the body armor, and whatever you do, get rid of all the prettiness. So the cauliflower ear, the broken nose. You can still see the beauty if you look at my eyes. You can still see the love that never went. But I made a carapace that frightened people because I was frightened. So it was only later when I was married and I've got children, and I was suffering with lots of depressions, that I suddenly had a moment like you, just the same, almost identical. Waking up at 4 a.m. in a cold sweat and just thinking, I can't live like this anymore. So I didn't know it, but I had a communion with my soul. I just said, I'm not prepared to live like this. This is the last time I'm going to let this feeling, this depression, come into my life and kick sand in my face. So I just said, I'm going to write down everything I'm afraid of, everything. I'm going to put it on a pyramid. I'm going to put my least fear on the bottom step and my worst fear on the top step. And I'm going to systematically confront those fears until they're all gone. And this is the big thing. I said, when I find what the truth is, I'm going to tell everybody. So I triggered on that straight away. And because I triggered on that, the assistance came. I started climbing the pyramid. I started to recognize that all of these fears that were holding me back, that were keeping me in a menial job, keeping me in an unhappy marriage, keeping me in an unhappy body, keeping me in an unhappy belief system. I recognized that I could change all of that just by challenging these fears, by intercoursing with them. So these three-dimensional monsters became two-dimensional cartoons, and they dissipated. And the moment they dissipated, this is the interesting thing, Jack, and you have to absorb 99% of them before they dissipate. But as they dissipate, they give you a little letter from God. Was a little letter in there saying, that's great, you've done that. You know, I'm the bogeyman, and I'm the harbinger of doom, but actually I'm not really. I'm a messenger. I'm a messenger. Your body is depressed because it's lost homeostasis. It's lost something of itself. It's lost its autonomy. And I'm going to take you on a path that'll help you to find that autonomy again. So it was saying, this is not a messenger of doom. This is a messenger of hope. Instead of running away from these feelings, sit in them and absorb them. Invite them in, like Milarepa, when he's assailed by 5 demons that he finds in his cave. Milarepa was a Buddhist saint. He comes back to his cave and there's 5 demons inhabiting it, and he suddenly starts thinking, oh, what can I do? How can I get rid of them? What spells can I do? Then he realizes that he's working straight away from a place of fear. So he goes in and he says to these demons, nice to see you, have a sit down, stay as long as you want. You bring your darkness and I'm going to bring my light. Let's see who prevails. Boomf, they went, they dissipated.
It's incredible.
Francis, when he was thrown in a dungeon by his father, when Francis started on his path towards sainthood, his father was very angry at him, threw him battered him, literally Francis's father and lots of his friends battered him, threw him in a dungeon and locked him in. Said, I'm not going to let you do any of this stuff. You're going to stay here till you find sense. And the moment he was in the dark, Francis said, I was assailed by 5 demons. He said they were kicking at me, punching at me, attacking me, telling me how worthless I was. And he just said, if you're in my life, if you're in, I lost my things there. If you are here, if you're in this cellar with me, it must be ordained, because God is omniscient and omnipotent and omnipresent, and nothing can be here without his permission. So you carry on. You keep doing what you're doing. Anyway, so they did. They got worse. They started doing more and more. So he turned to God and he said, thank you. You honor me. This is the greatest honor. The fact that you've brought this adversity to me so that I can convert it into light. It's the greatest honor. Please take whatever you want. If you want this body, take this body, because it's my enemy anyway. Bang. As soon as he was certain about the fact that he was prepared to absorb these energies, they dissipated. And the enemies in his cellar became guides. They became light. He literally converted them into light. So what I recognize from the fear pyramid is exactly the same as what Mandela found in Robben Island, what Milarepa found in his cave, what St. Francis found, in this dungeon, in this cellar, was that, and what Ushaba, the great Ushaba, the founder of Aikido, found when he was facing a firing squad in Japan. If we can have the courage to turn into these fears instead of turning away and say, show me your wares, let me have a look at what you've got, do your worst shot, tell me what the worst case scenario is, whatever you want from me, take it, because if it's real, you won't be able to touch it, because what is real is constant. And if you can take it because it's not real. When we can do that and we can turn into it, excuse me, instead of running from it, instead of putting a blanket over it, instead of putting tablets over it, instead of putting alcohol or sex or aggression or gossip or unkindness, instead of projecting it outwards and feeding it, we just say, do your worst. And then we deconceptualize this energy. So obviously it's an energy with a concept. This is evil. If we give it a concept, it will have a form. And if it has a form, it'll have an aspect. So it's evil, and its form is a monster, and its aspect is that I'm going to attack you. But if we strip away the concepts, there's no form and there's no aspect. There is just energy. And then we've got the ability to take that energy and do something magnificent with it. How do you think I've managed to write 50 books and 15 films and thousands of articles and stage plays? And when I wrote Notes from a Factory Floor, I couldn't believe how much I'd achieved in such a short time. It's because I had a reservoir of energy that I that consciousness, awareness, enabled me to denotate. So I just looked at it and thought, yeah, I can feel you. I can feel you there, and I can feel you wanting to overwhelm me, but I'm going to make you into something beautiful. I'm going to do something beautiful with it. And once I've converted you into something beautiful, I'm going to put it into a book form. I'm going to put it into a talk. I'm going to put it into a film. You know, I'm going to put it into a stage play. I'm going to put it into an article, and then I'm going to give it to the world because it's not mine anyway. So this is what the Buddha called freed from consciousness, freed from denotation by consciousness. And one of his students says, "Tell me what it is like to exist as you." He said, I am freed from denotation by consciousness. And that just means I've looked at everything and recognized that the labels give something a concept. The concept has a form has an aspect. And if I'm patient and I can sit there and do nothing and just absorb it, I can deconceptualize it. Or I can let it come through me if I've got the innards to do it. If I've got a very high melting point like tungsten, I can let it come through me. I can create the negative and the positive with the tungsten of my soul. And I can create beautiful form with it that will go out and work in the world. So that's what my fear pyramid did. And that came from a spark of inspiration. And that spark of inspiration came to me, like you, when I said, I'm not doing this anymore. This is not how I'm going to live. I don't know if I ever told you, but I spoke to a woman once who was desperately sad and suffering and lonely and depressed. And I spoke to her on the phone. She was just a friend of a friend. And she called me up. And she said, I can't live like this anymore. I just can't live like this. My husband's abusive. And I said, listen, why are you there? Why aren't you leaving? She said, Geoff, you don't understand. I've got a 10-bedroom house. And I said, what the fuck has that got to do with anything? But she was so attached to what she'd accumulated that she was prepared to live in abject misery. So this is saying to people, if you've got depression, and if you have, my heart goes out to you. But it's this opportunity. If you've got it, it's not a harbinger of doom. It's not an enemy. It's something inside of you saying you can live better. You've lost your center. You've lost homeostasis. In other words, you've fallen away from home. You've fallen away from the still center. And it's giving you the chance to change. But that change might mean looking at the person in bed and going next to you and thinking, I'm with the wrong person. That might mean looking at your 6 or 7 figure job and going, I'm in the wrong job. It might mean looking at the city or your life. It might mean looking at your accumulations and going, I don't even know why I want this big car and this chunky watch on my arm. It's just a weight. It's a dead weight. I could convert that. I could buy myself, I could buy myself some time with that. So when we start to turn into depression, one of the reasons we don't turn into it, or we don't turn into our suffering, is because at some level we know it's a messenger. At some level it's saying your life has taken something from you, and it's given you something in turn, in its place. So it's taken your autonomy and it's given you pieces of junk, tat. You've got all of these material things, but you're still not happy. You're still not sated. You still want more. And the more you take, the more it's going to take away your autonomy. This is what I realized. I realized that all of the things I really wanted to achieve, and the main thing of that was, this sense of finding autonomy and becoming an artist and writing, were behind this terror barrier, this thin line of fear. And in order to get it back, I needed to step into that fear, absorb it, and convert it so that I could go towards my kingdom. I needed to look at all the areas in my life where my will had been stolen. So some people's will is stolen to their diet. They can't control what they eat. They can't control what they drink. They can't control this tiny little organ here. They can't stop themselves from being unkind. They can't control their eyes. They can't stop themselves from looking at that girl's backside or that guy's, bank balance or or, they can't stop their eyes from doing certain things. They can't even control their own hands. We want to change the world. We want to live magically, but most of us haven't got the ability to control our own waistline, because we've lost our will. So in other words, we've lost our kingdom, Jack. So these energies that are coming are saying, it's time to win your kingdom back. So it's a bit like Odysseus coming back from the Trojan Wars to Ithaca, to his kingdom, to find that it's been overrun by vagabonds. And he walks into his kingdom and he's so different, he's not even recognized. And he realizes that he's got to win his kingdom back. And this is what happens when you wake up spiritually. This is what happened to you and to me. You wake up and you go, I don't want to live like this anymore. And you go, okay, I want my autonomy back. And then you realize that you sold your autonomy to too much food, too much drink, too much gossip, too much craving for money, too much craving for security, too much craving for validation, for fame, too much craving to be noticed, too much craving to be something that we're not. What we are is a fingerprint. It's so unique. So what it says is, you've woke up and you're in your kingdom, but no one's recognizing you as king. So you've got to go round and you've got to reclaim all of those lost parts of yourself. And that is what the spiritual work is. Of course, most people think it's socks and sandals and dream catchers, and they think it's you start talking about religion or you start talking about spirituality, they absolutely think you've gone soft, but it's because they don't understand the spiritual path. And it's not them that thinks it, it's their ego that thinks it. Because anybody that thinks the spiritual path is a soft path, hasn't looked at it yet. It's the most difficult path. It is the narrow path. So the fear pyramid led me on to confronting all my fears. One of them was a fear of violence. So I became a nightclub bouncer. That absolutely gave me the courage to sit and write, this was at the age of 28. But I hadn't written probably since I was 12 or 13, because I was too afraid to write. I had nothing to write, didn't know where to go. I was a writer without material. Suddenly I'm on the door, working in a factory in the day. I'm sweeping floors, but I've got stories to tell. And I've learned lessons. I've learned how to control my endocrine system. I've learned how to dissolve fear. I've learned how to convert fear. I've learned how to stop fear. I've learned how to trigger fear in other people. I've learned how to be physical if I need to be. I've learned how to use sound. I've learned all these things, so I start to write about them, and that becomes my first book, Watch My Back, which I wrote in the toilet of the factory that I worked at. So I've still got the notepads. They're around here somewhere, but I can't see them. But so I started to write about it. So I started to record my certainties. Certainties, it comes from the word Yakim in Islam, which is one of the 99 names of Allah, and it's an attribute of God or a remedy. So certainty is a remedy for uncertainty. If I'm certain about something, I'm impervious to everything that's uncertain. So I started to share my certainties, and it went from this tiny little toilet in Coventry and eventually rippled right across the world. I ended up teaching in Las Vegas for Chuck Norris, teaching my concepts and writing more books, and then going into film. There's a lovely Cherokee saying that that the big stories, you think you're looking for the big stories, but the big stories are hunting for you. They're looking for big men and women to tell them. They're there already. The big songs, the big stories, they're there. They're hunting for you. They're looking for somebody who has the vessel, who has an abnormally, has a tungsten self that has an abnormally high melting point. We're not going to be able to use this energy and channel this energy at a high level unless we develop that abnormally high melting point. And we do that when we go through the process of burnt sacrifice, animal sacrifice, which means we burn up the parts of us in the volition of action that are not us, and we sacrifice the animal soul. In other words, the ego. The ego that wants to own everything, we make it small, we burn it, and that's where we develop this very high tolerance and the ability to, instead of being a light bulb that takes 100 watts, We're a light bulb that can take 1,000 watts. That's what they call being Christed. To be Christed means that's what the symbol of the crucifixion is. It's the left pole, and it's the left terminal, and the right. If you imagine these are arms, the left terminal and the right terminal being met in the middle by the kingdom or by the self, which creates light. So crucifixion means to be magnified by 1,000, to be expanded, to be anointed. So in order to do that, we have to be prepared to sacrifice all of the parts of us that are not pure, or take them through that. You know, in the New Testament, that process is shown in the 14 steps. You know, the 14 stages. What did they call it? Via Lucas, the way to light. You know, when Christ goes from the 14 stations of the cross, when he goes from Pontius Pilate right through to the resurrection. That's an allegory. And I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm sure historically it did, but it's an allegory for it's an allegory for preparing yourself to receive the Christ energy. You don't want to call it the Christ energy, it's an analogy, it's just a way of preparing the vessel so that we can receive more energy. In the Buddhist terms, that would be purifying the self, removing the obscurations so that we get a clear view of what is already there. So that's my process, and that's a continuing journey. Like everybody, I continue to fall, and I'm lifted. I've fallen and I'm lifted on a daily basis. The help I need comes to me. The ideas that come to me, but I've still got to sit down with notes from a factory floor. For instance, I had to sit down and write 150,000 words over about 6-week period. And that takes tremendous, please don't forgive me if this sounds like I'm bragging. I don't mean to be, but it takes tremendous will and tremendous stamina, not just to sit and write, but to sit down and write every sin. That book is full of burnt offerings. It's full of my mistakes. It's full of my confessions. It's a book of repentance. And repentance just means to return. I need to go back to my autonomy, back to my authentic self. To get back to that, I have to go past all the dead bodies of my karma. I have to burn them up. I have to sacrifice them. So that's what Notes is. It's a very beautiful book because it is, it's bare bones honesty. It's naked. I'm metaphorically naked all the way through it. You said something interesting to me at the very beginning of this about when you were talking to Dr. John Gray. And he shared a moment of vulnerability, and you just said, God, it made you think, this is why I'm here. It's worth everything I'm doing for that one moment. And the reason that you felt it, Jack, I would say, is because we only really connect at the level of vulnerability. If I'm vulnerable and you're vulnerable, which means there's no agenda, all we're doing is we're exchanging soul. It's an exchange of God with God. It's a pure exchange. If there's an agenda, if I need something from you, if you need something from me, if you need to be praised for what you're doing, if I need to be validated for what I'm doing, we're not raw, we're not naked. So if I'm naked, metaphorically, and you are, it's a pure, vulnerable exchange of energy. When we get that, it gives the people out there listening permission to be similarly metaphorically naked. It gives them the permission to reveal their own secrets and remove the sickness of those secrets in order to get a little bit closer to their own homeostasis, their own home.
And so many don't feel like they have the permission. I know I feel that way. I less so now, but still I wake up, in a day, and I feel there's days when I don't want to get out of bed, and I feel like I don't have the permission to be myself. And then, via and the likes of your fear pyramid, I've used that. I've used other methods as well, and it's just breaking that down. And speaking of connectivity, I think connectivity is a tool that we can never avoid using. It's just some of us decide to connect to the fancy watch, the bank account, all of that, connect to the mask and propagate the mask because we're not comfortable going within and connecting to what's true. I love the idea of the light bulb. What it reminds me of is the law of polarity. There's this idea that what within is without. You never have an up without a down. You never have a left without a right. You never have an inside without an outside. And when I began to learn that, I realized through when I had to face difficult moments. So if I had lost, or I had a dog that died about a year and a half ago, and it was really tough. I decided to really face that, and I gave myself a full week off. I done loads of inner work when the dog died, just to really get into what it represented for me with 15 years of partnership. And when I began looking at it through the lens of that inside out, that, up and down the polarity lens, was to realize that if something terrible happens, if you see something you don't necessarily like or you don't resonate with, by contrast or to the opposite of that, it shows you what you do like. So if I go into a shop and somebody is rude to me, and if I feel my ego doesn't like that, or I can start to recognize and become aware that my ego is wanting to reverberate or regurgitate that, it lets me know that maybe, okay, what's the contrast of that abuse or that fear spouting from the opposite person that I actually am connected with. And then through a process of sitting in that vulnerability, sitting in that uncomfortableness, I can come out later. So I go into that cave and always return after with more love. I have fights with people, fights with my parents, fights with siblings, fights with so many different people. And anytime I do have those fights, it's because I'm not sitting in that love. I'm allowing their pains and their fears to begin to infiltrate my sense of homeostasis, my sense of being. And unfortunately, and I am so sorry to all of those that I've allowed myself to be weak enough to be able to, I should have been strong and stayed in my ground when they were going through that, and I didn't. There's so many times I didn't, and I have to own up to that. But as I move forward, my goal and my new sense of fortitude is I am practicing. And it's a practice. I know I'll fuck up and I'll keep fucking up. Even when I'm 50, I'll keep making these mistakes. But I'm committed to becoming who I am enough that I will, shake from my ground less and less, no matter what storm blows. And I think it's such a powerful thing because, it's 2020 and we're so inundated with so much stress, so much shit going on in the world. We're losing touch with ourselves. We really are. It's happening, everyone. And yeah, I was on a bus recently. I was getting a bus from Limerick to Cork. I remember I hopped on the bus. It's Corona times, and this is a few weeks or months back, around when masks first started coming in, and I don't wear them. I don't believe in it. That's my own deal. So I like to live authentic in my truth, and I don't wear them. And I hopped on the bus, and there was a man to the left who, if I could describe him, if any Harry Potter fans are out here, he kind of looked like Hagrid. And I kind of got a vibe. There was a big fear energy coming from him. So I walked past him, no problem at all. I sat across from him, maybe one row back. And then maybe 20 minutes into the journey, the bus stopped and got another passenger on. And this passenger was wearing a mask and had it down around his, they call it a chin diaper when people wear it down around here. And he came on. The two men had caught eyes. Now, the man who just came on the bus was clearly a bit drunk, and perhaps the fella who was on previously was also too. And typical men, you've probably observed this on a bouncer door. Sometimes it just takes a look, and it's like, why the fuck are you giving me that look? And they got this kind of a battle going on, and they started spouting and shouting at each other. And there was a mother down the back of the bus with a 4-year-old and a 4-month-old. And all of this going on. It was late at night. There's such high tensions because all this fear that's around the world at the moment. The two lads now, one is standing. So they both got up into the aisle. One is standing like literally a foot, 2 foot in front of me. The other a foot behind me. And they're squaring up. And I was just like, enough is enough. I stood up in between them. Again, no mask. The fight was supposedly started over a mask issue. And I just said, I set my intention that, look, I just want to create more love. If it means I get a punch in the back of the head, if it means that I break a rib or break a jaw, so be it, I'll deal with it. I stood up, I looked them both in the eyes, and done my best. I can't even remember what I said, but just to spread the love, spread the love. And eventually they sat down. That was all grand. You know, the journey went on, and it was just in that moment, it was so ironic because the fight started over masks, was ended by somebody not even wearing one, and everyone got on fine after. It was a powerful moment for me because very often in my life, and again, I'm sorry to those that I've let down, there was very often moments when I didn't stand up and face the music, when I didn't be who I was in the moment because I was like waiting for somebody else to do it, waiting for somebody else to listen to that voice that was only in my head to begin with and do what was right. Whether it was on a sports field, whether it was in a relationship, whether it was in a board meeting or whatever. There's so many times I didn't rise because I was connecting to the mask, connecting to the fear, connecting to the pain, as opposed to connecting to the true sense of myself. And there's this idea, I've heard Wayne Dyer speak on it quite a bit. It's, you know, if you took a picture of yourself at 4 years of age, 20 years of age, 84 years of age, which one of them is you? You know, the life force within each one of them, at each, you know, physical manifestation, it's the same person, where our real sense of life is totally weightless. And to reference that, as you were saying with John Gray in that moment when he was chatting about his wife, just goes to show she is passed on now, and even how her life, and her body is long gone from this world, but her life is still, her energy is still coming through his work. You know, her ability to be herself and her authentic self has influenced him, and is now still even traveling through the ethosphere and still coming into the world and sharing wisdom. And it's so beautiful. It's so powerful. You know, they say we die twice. We die when our body dies, and we die the last time somebody says our name. And if people could tap into that and realize we have such influence beyond just, you know, what we look like, beyond what our bank account looks like, beyond whether we have, you know, 42 wives or whatever it is, you know, all these ego masks. And it's just because there's so much bullshit. And whether it's mainstream media propagated, whether it's whoever, I don't even care anymore. I used to have a lot of anger towards institutions and towards our supposed leaders and all of this for training us to be so feared. But you know what? They're only doing what they're doing, and that's fine. Leave them off. So yeah, it stems back to, can you sit in your uncomfortability? And again, that's why I started this podcast. I knew I always wanted to share, and I knew I always wanted to help people, but I became very good at coming up with reasons why not to do it. And it took a really difficult moment to finally just shut that voice up, just say go away and reconnect with who I was, you know, and who I am. And though it's not always easy, as you said, you still have your bad days. You still wake up some mornings and you know, you don't want to face the day. But perseverance, you keep going into that cave, come out with more love. It's such a powerful idea. And I've heard your story. Maybe you can share with the audience around the abuser. And I heard when you met him years later. And it was just, when I heard it, it was so powerful. Just how you dealt with it, how he dealt with it, how that whole situation occurred. Would you mind talking us through that a little bit more and just what happened?
Well, I was abused at the age of 11. And of course, you don't realise till later on that sets this schema in your head. So I had an abandonment schema, and it's very powerful. Often makes you very afraid to leave a room. It makes you psychotically jealous. It makes you, if it's involving sexual abuse, it often leaves you with a proclivity towards extreme sexual behaviours like pornography. So I developed an addiction for pornography. I self-harmed. I sexually self-harmed. I didn't even know that's what I was doing. It was just a part of my life that was hidden from everybody, including me. I would self-harm and sexually self-harm, and then be racked with shame afterwards, racked with shame for days and days afterwards. Nobody knew about this. Never shared this with anybody. The first time I shared this with anybody, Jack, was when I was tired of it blackmailing me. As I started to write and use writing as a cleansing tool, I wrote it into a stage play called Fragile. And every single thing that blackmailed me, every single self-harm and sexual self-harm, I wrote into this play, and I put it on stage. And it ended up going national, had a small national tour, and it did a few international dates. But I put it on the stage at the Belgrade Theatre in Coventry, and over 2 weeks, audiences came every night and sat and watched it and helped me clean it. And it was all of the things that I'd done to myself that I was deeply ashamed of, that even my wife didn't know about, that I knew were blackmailing me, and I knew they were secrets that were making me sick, and that I knew in order for me to get one step closer to home, one step closer to return, I had to bring these into the light in order to create light from them. So what we bring into light becomes light. So I started to write about all of these things and started to confront it. And of course, you got the voices that are saying, if you share this, if people knew about this, if people knew how dirty you were, how depraved you were, if people knew what you did in the dark when you're on your own, they would disown you. Your agent will sack you. Your wife will leave you. Your kids will be ashamed of you. All of these voices. So I would have these moments of self-harm, rage, moments of sexual self-harm, lust, which I couldn't control. I couldn't control my own hands. And it would feed off that. And then afterwards, I would be filled with self-loathing and shame and dissonance and confusion. And then the same energy would feed off that. It would devour me. It would wipe me out. So in order to get rid of that parasite, I started to write about it. But what happened with the abuser was that I'd started getting to a senior level in martial arts. So even though I wasn't developing that well spiritually, I was developing very well physically and psychologically. So I could control myself physically. I could have a fight. I knew how to deal with martial arts, and I knew how to deal with violent people. I knew how to control my endocrine system. I knew how to control other people's endocrine system. And I'd started to bump into the Budo level of martial arts, which is the esoteric end. And I started to look at forgiveness and repentance as metaphysical powers. And this energy that I connected with my soul again, knew that there was a few things I needed to remove if I wanted to return to the center. So in order to return, we have to remove. So if I want to get back from where I am to my homeostasis, I need to get rid of the things that are blocking homeostasis. That for me, that at the time was violence, self-harm, sexual self-harm, which were all, they were all the same. They're all violence. And they were all the parasite left in me by this guy that abused me. I recognized that this is much later when I analyzed it. I recognized that when he abused me, he stole something from me. As I said, my autonomy, a part of my soul, my will, and he replaced it with his will, or with the burning coal of abuse. And I recognized that this when I bumped into him in this cafe in Coventry, serendipitously, I was being given the opportunity to give him back the hot coal and retrieve what he's stolen from me. But I couldn't do that with violence. If I was violent with him, it would maybe satisfy me for a second, but it would feed the burning coal. It would feed the parasite. If I was aggressive or angry or violent with him in any way, which I was obviously well equipped to do, it would have only created a stronger bond between us. And over time and space, even though we were disparate, I hadn't seen him for 20 years, he could still feed off me. Every time I was angry, every time I was dissonant. So I recognized I had an opportunity to dissolve this hatred with compassion. You can rob hatred of all its power with compassion. So I remember sitting in this cafe, feeling quite good about myself. You know, I was a high senior grade martial artist. I've got quite a reputation as a bouncer. And then I looked across and seen this guy sat opposite me in this empty cafeteria. And I was 11 again. I was 11. I was 11 years old again. And I was trembling from my ankles, from the soles of my shoe to the top of my head. I've never felt so much adrenaline. And all of my physical prowess fell away like a cloak, because it was just mask over mask over mask. All these veils fell away. And I was like I was looking at him with my soul. and I felt this terror, and I just wanted to run away. It was like a no man's land between me and him. It was only a few yards, but it was like a no man's land. And my chair felt like I'd have to climb out of a dugout. That was the level of fear I was experiencing. And I just thought, if I walk away, no one will know. He doesn't know who I am, and no one will know what's happened, but I would know. And I knew I was being given a chance to retrieve what had been stolen from me by serving this person. And the best way I could serve him was to forgive him. Not forgive him in the sense of letting him off. I haven't got the power to do that. That's God's job. I've got the power to give him over to God, or reciprocity, give him over to cause and effect. So I stood up and I walked across, and I was trembling with a mixture of rage and emotion. I could have been extremely violent or burst out crying, either one of them. And I was so trembling. And I stood in front of him, he looked up at me, and I said to him, "You don't remember me, but when I was a kid, you abused me. You groomed me and abused me." And he went to stand up, and I said, "Sit down." And it was a command. I mean, I was so certain. I felt the weight of divinity coming through me. And he just sat down. It was a big lump. And I said, when I was a kid, you abused me. I said, "You fucked my life." I says, "You need to know that I forgive you. I forgive you." And I meant it. I felt it. I felt it in my boots, and I felt the release of it. And as I went to step away, he stood up and he put his hand out, and his fingers were trembling. I can remember his fingers trembling in the air like that. And he was asking me to shake his hand. And I knew what he was saying. At the one level, he was saying, "Are you sure you're forgiven me? Are you properly forgiven me? Are you going to shake my hand?" At another level, he was saying, "If you shake my hand and make this concrete, you release me to my karma, and I release you to your healing." So it wasn't just at some level, at some soul level, this guy was just as much a victim as me. He was the victim of adverse forces that worked through him. Anybody that commits a depraved act has to be possessed by this negative caustic energy. So my compassion came from the fact that I knew he was a victim too. It didn't justify or condone what he did. What he did needed to be punished, and it needed to be punished in a court of law. That never happened. That was a route I took many years before, and it never happened. We just couldn't get it into court. So I knew that I couldn't let him off. I couldn't, but I could break the bond between me and him by saying, "I forgive you." And I forgive you means I give you back to reciprocity, to the law of compensation. And when he asked me to shake my hand, he was saying, I accept your forgiveness, and I'm going to release you. I'm going to release you from this bond, and I'm going to face my own karma. That was what happened. It wasn't spoken, but that's what was happened. I went away and began a 20-year period of healing, and he went away and killed himself over the next few years because I'd released him and separated myself and broke this bond. I gave him back the hot coals of his abuse, so he got that back, and I took my autonomy back. I took my autonomy back by forgiving him. Whilst I didn't forgive him, whilst I held a grudge or resentment, I was bound to him. He would always have my kingdom while I held any resentment towards him. So compassion is a remedy. It's an attribute of God. And in Islam, they call it Ar-Rahman, and it's one of the 99 names of Allah. And don't forget the Quran is a testimony to the Old Testament. It's basically just collaborating the Old Testament, and all of the prophets in the Quran are the same prophets as in Christianity and in Judaism in the Old Testament. So this idea of compassion isn't me being a great bloke. It's me being given the attribute of compassion. The attribute or the remedy of compassion is one of the 99 names of Allah. In other words, it contains all of God. It is a seed that contains all of our source. So when I gave him that tiny piece of arama, the tiny piece of compassion, it completely dissolved the hatred. I was able to go away and heal. He was able to go away, and he will atone. Even if he's dead at some point, he'll have to face that. And obviously he did face it in a lonely hotel room in London. which is a very sad way to end.
How did you feel when you heard that news? What did it bring up
just
any?
Felt just tremendous compassion.
Yeah.
I've just thought, I couldn't articulate why I felt it at the time, because I knew there was parts of this guy that were good, the parts of him that I idolized and the parts of him that I loved. There was a goodness there. There was a soul there. He was obviously a damaged person. And
we forget that. We forget, those who hurt us, they're in pain themselves,
Everybody's in pain. Yeah. Everybody's a victim, Jack. We label, this is the attacker, this is the victim. But I've spoke to guys in prisons all around the country, and I've yet to meet one who was not damaged or abused or without a father, or abused by a father, or neglected by a father at a very young age. Every one of these guys, some of them were killers, some of them were top-end drug dealers. I've been to lots of high security prisons, and I've not met one yet who wasn't a victim themselves. It didn't mean that they weren't dangerous. It didn't mean that they didn't need to be in prison. It just meant that they were victims, and we need to look at them in a slightly different way. Every one of those kids I saw in prison was a daddy to somebody, a husband, a father, a son. I could have quite easily ended up there myself. So when I heard he'd killed himself, I felt tremendous compassion, because I just thought it's a life wasted. His life had been hijacked by this force. He hadn't developed enough will to defend himself. He's no matter, even still, he's still responsible for his actions. We can have these energies rush through us, but we still have our choice about whether or not we engage them. Zoroaster says that the world is relying on us to find homeostasis. It's relying on us to find our balance and live correctly. We are human beings. We're still responsible for our actions. But I know people out there, I know these people that commit heinous crimes are assailed by the most tremendous forces, because I've been assailed by them myself and did some terrible things. I was extremely violent for a long time. I know they're assailed by tremendous forces. We expect them to resist these forces, don't we? But most of us can't resist a Mars bar. Most of us can't resist a second pudding. Most of us can't resist gossiping. Most of us can't resist overeating, overdrinking. Most of us can't resist having a judgment about something, being angry about something. Most of us won't take responsibility for what goes on around us. They won't take responsibility for their own health, their own well-being, let alone everything else. Listen, if I'm parked in a car, if I park my car outside my mother-in-law's house and I go in for a cup of tea, and someone runs into the back of my car and writes it off, which happened, the first thing I think is, where am I out of balance?
Yeah.
Where am I out of balance to have drawn that car into the back of my car? This girl drove into my car like it was invisible. We went out and we made her a cup of tea, and all I was thinking, people wanted to be angry and I'd give it no space. All I kept thinking was, where am I out of balance? So you're on a bus and there's fights kicking off around you. I'm not interested in the fights. I'm interested in what's going on in you.
Yeah.
Why are those fights happening so close to your proximity? How can they exist in your proximity? This is not a judgment. This is just saying that this is the level I live at. If I'm surrounded by people that are fighting, I want to know where I'm out of balance, because if my proximity is right, that cannot happen in my proximity. I'm not saying it doesn't, because I fall out of alignment. But if I fall out of alignment, I go, I'm out of alignment. That's why I'm attracting shit like a magnet. Yeah. So what we do is we go, if I look around me and there's turmoil around me and there's violence around me, I said to my wife once, this city is so violent. I said, everywhere I go, somebody wants to take a pop at me. And she said, Geoff, there's a common denominator. It's everywhere you go. When you start taking full ownership and you start going, why am I, not that I'm creating it, or not that I'm attracting it, but I'm creating it. It's a projection of something in me that is warring. So if something's right end in my car, I need to look at a back end in my car. I need to look at what it is I'm doing to attract that. I found out what it was straight away, and I redressed it over the period of the next few months. It wasn't easy to change what I needed to change, but I saw it. So the idea then is that we go, okay, why am I attracting this? Why, if I've got a proximity to God, Why have I got an opinion about this? Why do I care about that? Why have I got a judgment about that? Why do I feel rage come up when I see this politician, or when I see that shiny button, or when I see that authority figure, or when I see that critic? What is that in me?
Mm.
And if I'm feeling it as an emotion, and it's a strong emotion, and I want to think it and say it, it's because those two guys on the bus are my teacher. They are manifesting in my space to say, we're just giving you a little projection of what's kicking off in you.
You're the tungsten, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. They're saying, once you remove those, we can take your melting point to a higher level. You want God, you can have as much of him as you want, but you've got to make room. And to make room, we have to get rid of all the things that are not God. They call it apophatic theology. In order to find the self, we have to first identify, in order to find out who we are, we have to first identify who we're not. I'm not that angry person. I'm not that judgmental person. I'm not that rebel. I'm not that jealous, envious, greedy person. That's not me. Okay, that's good. We found that. So let's get rid of them. Those identities have been squatting in your body for a long time. Maybe those perceptions have been squatting for generations because they get handed down as a genetic inheritance. We might have 1,000-year-old battle going on inside of us. And if we want to make more room for consciousness, awareness, we have to go to war with those things. We have to demand autonomy back from them. So that part of me is taking over my eating. So I'm going to win my autonomy back and control my eating. That part is taking over my tongue. So I'm going to win that part back and reclaim it. That part is making me very judgmental, or it's making me very reactory. So I'm going to find those myriad personalities, and I'm going to dissolve them, and I'm going to convert them. This is what happened in the 10th canto of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, in the classic Hindu text, when at the birth of Krishna. And it's an allegory about the birth of consciousness. Krishna's born into this town, and the prophecy is that when Krishna's born, King Kamsa, who's the king of the land, is going to be dethroned. So King Kamsa hears this prophecy and sends out, very much like the story of Moses, sends out these demons to kill all of these children. They find Krishna and recognize he's the prophesied new king. So he sends these demons to kill Krishna when he's a baby, when he's young. In other words, to try to destroy consciousness when it's just woke up. Krishna fights each one of these demons and he beats them. And each time he beats a demon, the nature of that demon is liberated, and the effulgence that's locked in the demon comes across to Krishna. Each time it gets a bit stronger. You can see how similar this is to me climbing my fear pyramid. Eventually, he defeats all of these demons and he goes and finds King Kamsa, who represents the Satan, represents the false ego. He represents the pseudo sovereign, and they have a wrestling match, and he defeats Kamsa, and Krishna becomes sovereign. He becomes sovereign of the land. So in other words, it's our fight for our autonomy. Coming back to what I said at the beginning, it's our fight for our own will. But to do that, we have to stop being asleep. If we're asleep, we go, everything's happening all around me and it's chaotic and it's making me very angry, but I'm not like that. When we wake up, we go, everything's a shit storm and it's happening all around me. And it's because I've woke up and I'm in a kingdom that I not only that I don't control it, but I don't see that it's even my kingdom. I don't see that it's attached to me. When you get to a certain level, you no longer see the inside and the outside as separate. You no longer see the corporeal or the incorporeal as different. But then it's exciting because it's going, okay, the world is giving me indications of when I'm in alignment, because the book will fall from the sky and land on my desk and guide me, and it will tell me when I'm outside of alignment, because the big fight kicks off on the bus.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
I never thought of it that way, and
but it's happened to me. So my wife used to batter me. She used to go, "That's you. That's you." I'd say, "That guy on the television. Oh, he drives me mad. He's criticizing films and he's never made a film." And she'd say, "What is it about that guy that it disturbs you? What is it in you that that you don't like about yourself? I said, he's criticizing everything. She says, you do that. I said, no, I don't. She says, you do. You come back from the cinema and you'll tell 20 people that you didn't like that film. I said, she said, he's just got the courage to do it on television. It was so right.
Yeah.
So I started to work on that aspect of myself. And I was at the BAFTA club in London, and I bumped into this guy, this critic, and I wanted to hug him.
Yeah.
I wanted to say to him, "You've been such a great teacher to me. Thank you." If you're awake, the universe will really give you all the signs you need to see, but not if you project and blame. So it's so that's what it's a continuing journey, as we said. We're continuing to do it.
I'm conscious of our time, so we're just about ready to finish up. It's been such an amazing conversation. To caveat into the 2 questions I mentioned to you earlier on, I gave you some warning. New segment on the show. The question number 1 is, you're 482 years of age, you're finally on your deathbed, and you have one breath left in your body. Now it can be as deep as a breath as you want. And you can, if you can say one thing with that breath to either your younger self or to anybody, what would that be and why?
Thank you, God. Thank you, thank you, thank you, God. He's around me. He's in me. He's saved me. This energy, I can't articulate it, but when I'm still and I find stillness and quiet, I feel him as in energy, and he makes shapes and he shows me where to go. And I am so looked after. He brings the most beautiful people and the most beautiful opportunities into my life. So I would just say, thank you, God.
Beautiful, beautiful. Really powerful. And the other question then, and this is for the hashtag Praise It Forward, just to spread the gratitude and love to other people, and maybe somebody in particular out there that you would like to give a shout out to, who's doing great work and contribution in God's energy. Who would that be and why?
I'd like to thank Gabriella. She convinced me to do an Instagram page when I'd come away from social media. And she's a friend of mine. She's married to my friend Paul Shemazian, and she's a really great girl. And she basically runs my Instagram page, and she allows me to just put my stuff on the platform and do nothing else. And anything I need to hear, any private messages, she'll forward on to me. But she does a massive amount of work for nothing. She just does it because she wants to serve. And it's people like Gabriella, people like my own wife Sharon, who are not seen. People that aren't aware that people want to give you the praise. I can't take the praise anyway because it doesn't even come from me. But it's people like Gabriella that I really want to thank, because she enables me to just sit on what I want to do, which is create the work, and she does all the other stuff, and she puts it online for me, and she does it so gracefully, and she doesn't ask for nothing. And I always say thanks to her, and I always appreciate it, but it's nice to have the chance to publicly say how grateful I am, to Gabriella, and how grateful I am to my own wife, who, I've stood with my wife at meetings when I've gone to book signings, and she could be invisible. People walk straight past her. People walk straight through her. We had some food at a place once, and someone picked up her food and ate it. She was so invisible. And I'll often introduce her to people, and they won't even look at her. They just look at me, and they think it's me. They think I'm the guru. They think I'm the sage. They think I'm the font of this knowledge. I'm not. All of it comes from God. None of it's mine. He picks up my stories. He picks up my flavors, but none of it's mine. That's something I'm certain of. But I couldn't do it without the facility of somebody who doesn't want praise, who doesn't want validation, and who is close enough in my proximity to be able to say to me, "You're out of alignment," And if I fall out of alignment, which I do, she just goes boom, and she catches me really quick. And I might wriggle like a worm, and I might try to rationalize it. But when she's certain, there's no movement. There's no movement. So I need that. We all need a spiritual counsel. And it doesn't necessarily need to be someone that Sharon doesn't really follow spiritual path. You know, she's not a vegan like me. She doesn't follow a spiritual path. But when she sees me out of alignment, she knows, and she brings me back into alignment. So
she has
she
a
doesn't need
powerful
to know
intuition.
God. She doesn't need to know God in the way I know God for God to work through her. Because sometimes she speaks and it's so profound. I said to her once in a fit of excitement, I've got to make films that touch millions and millions of people. And she put a hand on my arm and she was really urgent. And she said, Geoff, when you spend half an hour on the phone talking a stranger down from a depression, she said, that is global. I remember I was in Leicester Square once. And I can't even explain it. I was sitting eating some pizza in Leicester Square with Sharon. And I looked across and I saw this guy feeding out of a bin. And it could have been my brother, you know, it could have been my sister. And I just felt this overwhelming compassion and I wanted to take my shoes off and give him my shoes. I felt like I was in the presence of divinity. I felt like I wanted to give him something. So I went over to him with my pizza and I said to him, are you hungry? And he just looked at me and just nodded. And I said, do you want my food? And he just nodded and I gave him my food. And I just felt so emotional. I felt like everything disappeared. And I felt like I connected to what there was no object and subject anymore. No me and him, no successful guy eating in Leicester Square, you know, rough sleeper. There was none of that. There was just two souls. I felt God directly through him. I felt a connection to everything. And he would be what I would call in the Judaic texts in Kabbalah, they would call him a charity carrier. And they say that when you meet somebody that's in need, they are charity carriers. In other words, when you serve them, you're able to accumulate credits from them, from God, because they will give you the opportunity to serve them. And it's not for them. You're not serving them for them. You're serving them for you. You're able to accumulate credit. In other words, this person, if you serve them, if you've got the courage to go over and touch the hand of that rough sleeper, the one that most people are stepping over, and look into his eyes and see your brother there, see your father there, see God there, he will allow you to get direct access to God. So charity carriers, when you see them, you've got to run and serve them. The rabbis used to say, there's a guy out over there begging for food. Let's be the first to earn credit from him by giving him some money.
Beautiful.
When I went back to Sharon, I went back and it was just, it was so spontaneous. I just left her. I just left her. I just ran off and left her. And when I came back, I sat down and she looked at me and she said, Geoff, it is never going to get bigger than that. And I just love that because it's not.
Such wisdom. Jesus. Yeah, that is amazing. And from my experience, I haven't met Sharon or interacted with her. Again, I can feel the love that emanates from you, from her. So I'd like to extend my gratitude to her for facilitating and nourishing you. And a shout out to Gabriella, and she's at Recite Films. She's been such a pleasure to deal with.
She's a great girl.
Dealing with her before the show.
She's so lovely.
Yeah, really,
she's
really.
Spanish. She's beautiful in body and soul. She's just she's so kind to me,
Yeah, and and that's why I want to do this segment, is because, and look, they probably don't even need this recognition. They don't need this validation. But
that's why they should have it, because they don't want it.
Exactly. And there's so many people out there that, maybe don't feel the love for themselves. And I guess I'd encourage people to spread the love, share the love, share the gratitude. And if more and more of us can tap into that gratitude and start to, make our hearts grow together and connect through that energy, then we'll have so much less to fear.
Yeah, it's very true.
When I tap into that myself, I don't worry about tomorrow. I don't worry about 5 minutes time. I don't worry about what's in my wallet or what notification is going to come through my phone or whatever. It's just peace. No, it's hard.
We say in the Old Testament, the cows who pulled the tabernacle only sang when they pulled the tabernacle. So the tabernacle was this huge receiver for God, and the cows used to pull it on a trailer. And they said the cows sang when they pulled the trailer with the tabernacle, even though it was heavy. And that's this body is a tabernacle. So we sing. We only sing when we're serving God. We only sing when we act as a tabernacle for God.
That's amazing, and I know that feeling because I love giving. You know, and even little things. I remember several times, you know, I'd help one of my brothers out or a friend out with something around the house. And when they'd say thanks or when they whatever, I'd actually get I'd well up a bit. And it's like, I don't know why I'm welling up. I'd just feel that overwhelming gratitude, and you just tap in. And
That's what we said about charity carriers.
Yeah. And it always just struck me when I was able to give. I remember when I was young, just a quick story. My mother, who was just a wonderful woman, she had this pair of leather gloves. They could not have been cheap. I can't imagine it being cheap. They were a beautiful pair of leather gloves, wool lining inside them. And we were in home one night. I was maybe 11 or 12 years of age at this stage. And she had these gloves for as long as I could remember. And they were such a value to her. And we got a knock on the door, and it was some student, I think an Eastern European student, calling around door to door. This was middle of January. It was freezing cold outside. And called to the door selling their art, and beautiful art for like, you know, €5 or something. It was kind of sad in a sense to see them undervaluing their own work. And my mother, you know, she came in, she took a lot of the art from it. She overpaid for it. And she went in, she got the gloves, and she handed away the gloves. And I remember looking, and I was in my own head, I was running through jealousy. I was running through all this kind of I want them, and all of this in my own. But I was just starstruck at what had just happened, this moment of pure giving. And I'd like to thank my mother for that lesson. It was just one of the most beautiful moments. And as you said, that charity giving, that's when we really feel true.
Doesn't get any bigger than that, does it?
Doesn't get any bigger.
It's a powerful story to end on, I think.
Yeah. Just very quickly, where can people find you? I know you said Instagram. Have you a website? The books?
No, just the Instagram. That's the only place I've got the presence online is Geoff_Thompson_ official. Geoff Thompson official. So they can look at my current work on there.
Fantastic. And everyone get on the book, Notes from a Factory Floor. We'll be giving away 2 copies as well. So yeah, Geoff, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you coming through all of your pain and turning that into all of our gain. You know, you had to go through that, and I'm glad you did in some sense, because we wouldn't have this today without it. So thank you again so much. Really touching conversation, and I wish you all the best. So thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Jack.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
So that's all for today, folks. I hope, like me, you enjoyed your time with Geoff. It truly is an inspiration, and I know I learned so much from having the glorious opportunity to sit down and talk with him. Remember, you can check him out over on Instagram. He is at Geoff_Thompson_official, and I highly recommend you do so, because there's so much wisdom coming from that page alone, and all of Geoff's work for that matter. Again, if you'd like to be in with a chance to win a copy of Geoff's latest book, Notes from a Factory Floor, you can support us over on Patreon, where we will be giving a copy away to one of our members there. Every donation and every contribution you make can go an awful long way to helping us make the show even better and to continue being of service to you. Otherwise, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn, where we are at LifeFit Studios, or my personal page at JackO'Halloran_IE. And if you find one of the posts about this episode, either tag a buddy in the comments below, share the post to your story, or share it to your feed. We'll throw you into the draw for the other copy as well. So, thank you again so much for tuning in and being part of this wonderful journey. And I wish you now to stay safe, be kind to your fellow human, and go with love. Yours in health, Jack.